everyone. Welcome to the 10th Annual New York Game Awards. This is a celebration of our first 10 years and a fundraiser for the New York Video Game Critics Circle's work in underserved communities. In the weeks leading up to the awards on January 26th, we'll be honoring some of those immensely creative geniuses who've made outstanding contributions to video games, to the industry, and to fans like you and me.
That's right, Reggie. The first of these Andrew Yoon Legend Awards goes to Jerry Lawson, the awesome creator of the video game cartridge, the Fairchild Channel F console, and a strong black man who stepped up and never gave up. Without the brilliance of Mr. Lawson and his cartridge innovations, we would not have had any of the great consoles we've had during the 60 years of storied game history. Not the Atari consoles, not the Sega consoles, not even the Nintendo Switch, which actually still uses cartridge-inspired card.
Tonight, we're thrilled and honored to have Jerry's son with us to accept our Legend Award. Anderson Lawson, your father did amazing, essential work that will be remembered forever. Congratulations on having such a brilliant father and for receiving our Andrew Yoon Legend Award on the 10th anniversary of the New York Game Awards. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
From what you remember, how did your father get his start and how did he rise to create this great thing that changed the world of video games?
So my father has always had an affinity for electronics. In growing up, he was into science, and it was encouraged early in his childhood. My grandmother, Manning's Lawson, spent a lot of time making sure that he went to some of the best elementary schools in New York City so that, his curiosity for science would be, nurtured in the right way, so to speak.
Okay. So one of the things that interested me, Anderson, was that your father, at the age of 13, I think, created this radio station in his bedroom. Can you tell me a little bit about that? And was he also kind of a tinkerer and creating stuff all the time?
Yeah, so he was very much a tinkerer, and actually around that time, in most of his life, he was into ham radio. A lot of people don't really know that. I want to say his handle was WH6LVN. I just remember him saying that a lot in the garage growing up. And he even had a hat. I can find that somewhere where he actually has his call letters on there. So he spoke to people all over the world with the ham radio. And so he was into that pretty big. And
that is very cool.
Yeah. And then from there, as far as the tinkering is concerned, that actually led him into doing a lot of fixing of television sets in his early to late teens. That's kind of how he would make money, would be by fixing people's televisions. And he was even looking to early on start a repair business doing that. So that's like something a lot of people don't know.
That's great. From what you remember, Anderson, who were your father's inspirations?
I know and this is just from hearing this, obviously I wasn't there, but when he was a child, George Washington Carver was somebody he was aspired to be like. He wanted to make a difference and he wanted to be a scientist of some type, right? My great-grandfather wanted to be a physicist, but couldn't do that because of some of the racial disparities at the time. And so he ended up being a mailman, which is, that's not, it's a far stretch, right, from being some type of physics professor. But, as long as he could remember, and he always talks about, he just wanted to be, more than just, a person that he wanted to make a difference, I guess, for the lack of a better term. He spent his life in electronics, and he really had a love for it. So he would do it for free, I guess is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't for money, it wasn't for career. It was who he was, and it was all day, every day.
Well, it was great. That's great to hear that when you find something you love, it doesn't feel like work.
Right.
But he was also involved, Mr. Lawson, in the homebrew computer club along with some other geniuses like Steve Jobs. And I wonder if you can tell me what that was like for him, and also there he was one of two black men in the club, and I wondered if you felt that there should have been more people of color, or he felt there should have been more people of color in the club when he talked about it.
Well, when talking about that, I think that from his perspective, he would, always wanted African Americans in general to be more interested in science, I think. And a lot of times people, you know, growing up weren't in his time for whatever reasons. He used to balk at sports a lot because he felt like, you know, there's a lot more to life than that, right? And people put a lot of, what if they say, stock into being an athlete. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but he felt like that very same person could be a great scientist if he applied himself, right? Or that person could be a doctor, it could be something else other than just an athlete. So as far as that homebrew computing club is concerned, I think that, he would have liked for it to be, a little more diverse, but it's what he, I guess, would expect for that time, right? There was nothing in him that would complain about that type of thing. It's people of all colors, shapes, and sizes in our garage, as I grew up seeing. If they had an interest in science, then it really didn't have a color, if that makes sense.
It really does. It really does. Let's get to the work he did to create the console. Your father created a Demolition Derby game in his garage. How did that game and the making of the Fairchild Channel F come about? And if you know, what were some of the challenges that he faced?
Oh, sure. So that, I guess I can start with the Demolition Derby. Um, from what I understand, he worked on that for or with a company out of Mountain View. They put that game out, and then it was published through um, Chicago Coin. And but the very first, uh, I want to say the very first game that they put out, they put inside a pizza parlor. I want to say it was a Shakey's Pizza in Sunnyvale, I believe, and made a little bit of money. Now, all at the same time, he's working at Fairchild. So he was a field engineer. So a field engineer is somebody that they work with companies and talk about different parts that they might have. So if a company has an interest in building something, he can provide them insight into different electronic components that might be able to work inside their system. One of those guys, or one of his customers, was a man by the name of Al Alcorn. And he worked for a company at the time called Syzygy. And Syzygy is actually the name of Atari. It's Atari before Atari. And he needed some components to display, I want to say, um, digital characters on his screen, right? Um, for his Pong game. And my father provided him with some insight into that. And so they developed a friendship. And shortly after that, that's when he started his work on the Demolition Derby. After that was completed, his bosses got wind of what he had worked on, and it ended up that he was asked to be the head of a new video game division that they were starting over at Fairchild Semiconductor. So into that idea, the idea of a cartridge actually didn't come directly from my father, right? It came from a company called Alpex. Alpex Corporation had a prototype. I want to say they were in Connecticut, and they had some ideas on how to come up or have a system that interchanged cartridges. Um, it was a rather crude prototype, and they wanted to uh, commercialize it. Right? How do we get this to market? It's very I don't want to say it's easy to make a prototype. I'm working on one as we speak, right? But taking something from a prototype situation and then uh, to a commercial product is a very, very challenging task. So my father worked with a couple of gentlemen from Alpex to use the uh, Channel F microprocessor to create this new system. Right. So that's the beginnings of the entire idea there, right? And the original prototype consisted of uh, blocks that they used for with I want to say it was a 25 pin connector to connect the different game modules. So there wasn't like a zero insertion force type of plug-in cartridge situation. There were no joysticks. They actually had keyboards, right? So my father actually came up with the idea of a joystick for that console, and rather unique. It has 8 degrees of freedom, right? Up, down, north, south, east, west, twist to the right, and twist to the left, right? So I haven't seen anything like it to date, and I've played on a lot of systems. So it's a rather unique type of control.
Well, Anderson, what was his work ethic like? I remember seeing a photo of him falling asleep at the computer and made me think that this is a person who works relentlessly and very much cares about the work he is doing. And so,
So
what was his work ethic like?
so Harold, it's funny, we spoke earlier about what he loved, right? So he loved electronics, right? So that was his love, that was his passion, and it was so much ingrained into who he was that it's only natural that you fall asleep in it. Now I know he spent a lot of time reading stuff, you know, when say tinkering, because I didn't know when I was a child what exactly he was doing. Um, it was only dawned on me till I got a little bit older, and I would help him with things. And I understood how to solder and components onto a printed circuit board when I was maybe 8, 9 years old. Right? That's just something I knew how to do because he taught us that. But he, his work ethic, I would say, he was always working. So it's kind of weird, I wouldn't even want to really call it work, right?
Mm.
You know what I mean? To me, work implies that you don't like what you're doing.
No,
Is it? I know,
do know.
you know what I'm saying. And I'm not, and I know that you didn't mean that in that sense,
Yeah.
but it's just that he enjoyed what he did so much, Harold. It was like, it's not work. He was living his passion. I know, it's because I'm trying to describe it in such a way that he never really walked away from it, if that makes sense, right? To me, when you say work, I'm doing something, and then when the effort is over, I at least get to walk away. When,
No, absolutely, and I think certainly as a writer, I feel like I enjoy it and I get in the zone, and that's how time passes. And I know the same with Reggie as well. That it's often doesn't feel like work. It just
Right.
feels like you're in another way, another state of being.
You're doing what you were meant to do, right? And so when you're doing that, it's never work.
Absolutely. That is so true. We've talked about a number of different things tonight. You've shared some insights about your dad. What's the one thing that you want everyone to know about your dad that maybe hasn't been shared before?
That's an interesting question. Um, Actually, people who know him, know that he was extremely funny, right? The man could tell a very good story. So if you spent any time around Jerry Lawson, you would know that he has a tremendously good sense of humor, and he watched a lot of comedy. Something that a lot of people wouldn't know about him. DL Hughley was one of his favorite comedians near the end of my father's life. He used to say, "Oh, I love that guy. It's funny, right?" He would watch Jerry Seinfeld. He'd watch stuff like that, but he would think it was hilarious. So that's something that's completely different, right? His sense of humor um, was pretty good. I spent many a day with him, getting some pretty good laughs.
That's very cool.
Great. That's very cool, Anderson. And I just wanted to thank you for coming on to the 10th Annual New York Game Awards to talk about your awesome dad and his enduring legacy, not only to the world of games, but to electronics and in making life a little easier and more fun for all of us. So thanks once again for being here and accepting the award. We'll get you the award very soon. And until then, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you for having me, and I really enjoyed it. And again, it's an honor and a pleasure to be on here with both of you, Reggie and Harold. Thank you.